go to Italy for grants.
Okay, welcome back, folks. This is the last bill introduction for this afternoon. We are joined by Representative Harrison. Made it all the way up from our appropriations committee. We appreciate him carving out a little bit of time so we can hear about the bill he just sent to our committee room. Representative, how are you?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. I am Jim Harrison, the state representative from Chittenden, and I'm here to give you a quick overview on H-145, which has to deal with public meetings and law. So, really like your committee room. Just want to say that for the record. This is very comfortable, a little bit out of the way.
We like to think we're worth the trek.
Well, it's congratulations. Anyhow, H-145 is a very short and simple bill. I'm sure we've all been to meetings, whether they're school boards, select boards, any kind of municipal meetings, and some members of the public may have a tendency sometimes to be disruptive. And we have obviously constitutional constraints in freedom of speech, and those need to be guarded very carefully. On the other hand, when you have meetings where some members may want to shout over others when it's not their turn to talk, that can be very discomforting. One of the communities I represent has had several select board members resign in the past couple of years. And other town officials because they've had the misfortune of having someone that's been disruptive. And understanding the statute, they feel there's limits as to what they can and can't do. That they're not alone. There are other communities, I've heard similar stories where folks are disrupted. So with the help of our esteemed counsel over there in the corner, drafted a bill which deals with disorderly conduct at meetings, which is an existing statute. I don't believe it's used very frequently because of some of those guardrails in terms of constitutional provisions. I've also reached out to a former member of the legislature who happens to be on the select board in one of the communities I now represent, Sarah Buxton, who is an attorney, and she deals with municipal law. So she's very familiar with this section of statute as well. So together with Mr. Anderson's help, you have 145 before you. And basically, the bill proposes to expressly authorize the chairs of public bodies to adopt rules governing public comment in the disruption of a meeting by a member of the public. So when I talk about shouting over and using your free speech rights to an extreme, perhaps the body could adopt some rules that put some guardrails on that. And so then it goes on further to amend 13 VSA 1026 on disorderly conduct and adds a new subcategory 6, substantially impairs the effective conduct of a meeting of a public body. So that's really the gist of it. I think it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. I respect the help and appreciate the help that we got from Ledge Council to make sure that we were still protecting constitutional rights of any member for the public to participate in meetings. But if folks don't follow the rules, then they can't continue. And I think there's a limited period of time where they
60 days.
60 days. Yeah. That doesn't mean they can't participate online. And as your committee knows better than most, that we changed some of the things last year to allow for remote options on meetings, which we've sort of grown accustomed to during the pandemic.
Okay. Any questions for the representative? So, Representative Waters Evans.
Thank you.
Then Kyle.
So within creating those rules, for their, when they're creating and adopting their own rules, within that, would it include rules around who gets to decide if someone's disruptive and how that process works? Like, is that part of it, or?
I would think that prerogative, I'm not the lawyer. I'll stand corrected, if the lawyer over in the corner interrupts me, but I would think that that would be the chairs or the moderators placed to call out a violation. But I suspect any member of a public, if you're a select board and you've got 5 members, I would think any one of them could, certainly bring it to the attention of the chair that a violation was occurring of their rules of conduct for public meetings.
And would this apply to the people who are the members, who are the part of that governing body being disruptive, or does that only apply to people who are not?
I believe it talks about the members of the public.
Right.
So this wouldn't be self-policing the elected officials who are
Yeah. Interesting.
executing the meeting. It would be this is merely about behavior of the public who are in the audience while the meeting is being conducted.
We want the public involvement. That's very, very important. And this makes some very minor modification that might be helpful to a governing body to establish rules of conduct if they feel like they're having issues or challenges. So when you mentioned the members of the board itself, I can't help but think, but I've probably been guilty of speaking out of turn a few times downstairs. So I hope I didn't do myself something.
I'll do it. Representative Coffin, did you have a question?
Yes, just making sure I read this right, and I just was curiosity because it says make sure that if they're asked to leave and it's no more than 60 days, but they'd still be able to attend, if I'm reading this right, they'd still be able to attend by Zoom or however that goes.
Yes, that's my understanding.
No, I like that. I wanted to make sure I read.
Oh, yeah,
that
no,
right, because
that's important.
I could understand somebody getting upset one day
Mhm.
and then, okay.
I see hand
Thank you.
Representative Morgan.
Yes, no, I'm just more of a commentary. Is it obviously some level of subjectivity here, with what's over the line, of course. But I get it, having been on a municipal board for, I've not really seen it here, but in a municipal board for 15 plus years collectively now, I've seen some people get downright rude and out of line, and we've had to go, hey, enough, but this would give it a little teeth, I suppose. But I could see the subjectivity of it, and then the open meeting law purists being like, the 32 tooth suck of. But on the flip side, I get it.
Yeah, no. Like the legislative intent behind this is definitely noted to realize, but you do get into that sort of
Yeah.
Representative Hango, then Stone.
Thank you. Something that came up when we discussed open meeting laws last year might apply to this. My question might apply to this. So if a person is told that they can't come to the meeting in person, but they can join electronically, what about the whole Zoom bot thing? Like if they're on an electronic meeting, does the moderator or whoever's running Zoom have the ability or the right under this proposed legislation to shut off the audio for that particular person because they've already been banned from coming in person to the meeting, but they could certainly unmute themselves and say whatever they want on an electronic meeting. So to me, there's not a whole lot of difference between attending in person and attending electronically, unless there is some kind of a a mechanism where the chair would only allow them to speak if recognized or through the chat portion of the electronic meeting.
I am not a technical expert, but I think I believe as the moderator of, say, a Zoom meeting, can control who's muted and unmuted.
Mhm.
Which is probably not used enough sometimes for
Yeah.
other reasons. I was listening into one of our select board meetings, totally spaced in the fact that we were unmuted and having our, dinner conversation. And finally they texted me and say, could you mute your, I believe the moderator in most platforms can control that.
Okay, so would it be your intent then that that person be muted on those electronic meetings until their 60 days is up?
I think that could be established as part of the rules. I'm not saying that they should be muted. If you have, a lot of meetings have a open comment, public comment period at the beginning of a meeting. So,
Public forum.
a public forum for public input, and I would assume you could still allow that person or persons to participate in the public forum, but the issue and the disruption happens when a person does not or continues to speak later over other members that are there, whether it's the board themselves or if you have a department in for talking about the highway budget or what have you. So during the open, Tucker will correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that necessarily prohibits the public comment portion as long as you can control it.
If you wish, counsel.
Sure. What is the question?
If the individual who's already been asked not to come in person because they've been disruptive of the meeting as it progresses through the duration of the meeting, but now they're electronic, do you allow them to speak during the public comment period and then have them muted for the rest of the meeting? Or do you allow them to have the ability to jump in during the rest of the meeting, which to me would seem counterproductive to letting them be on the meeting because they've already disrupted a meeting?
Sure. So, first, for the record, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel, and I will make sure that we cover this more in depth. The committee takes this up again, and I have an opportunity to do a walkthrough. You have a few areas of complexity interacting here. So an individual who has been removed from a meeting and is subject to potentially a 60-day period where they're not permitted to attend in person at a meeting. And they're going to attend on a designated electronic platform. You know, the meeting law requires that platform allow for direct access and participation of the public. But it does not require that, for example, the microphones stay open for the entirety of the meeting. So they could mute that individual until they get to the point in the meeting under 1 VSA 312 subsection H. Public body grants public a reasonable opportunity to express its opinion on the matters considered by the body during the meeting. And that would be subject to reasonable rules, but that individual would still permitted to provide comment on what happened during, subject to whatever rules of order are put in place for remote participation. And overarching theme when we do dive into page 145 is going to be the interaction between First Amendment freedoms of speech, freedom of assembly, instances where there's conflict between the two, and then the rules that may be adopted at the local level interacting with this. And there's a lot of nuance in H 145. There are quite a few policy choices that have been made that I'll flag for the committee. They could be areas of concern that we'll discuss.
Thank you for making that extremely clear.
Representative Stone.
That's actually what I was gonna bring up is the freedom of assembly and freedom of speech. And looking at this bill, I'm not seeing anything that would help provide guidance to the towns and municipalities to make sure that they're not creating rules that would run interference with this. And the only way we would find out about it is if there's a lawsuit later. But I didn't know if I was missing something, if you thought about that. I don't know if everyone has a Sarah Buxton. You know, that's what
I do know the lawyers, have communicated their thoughts, and I think, I don't want to speak for Ledge Council, but I think they're trying to be very careful how we craft
how you
it.
word it.
And I would refer to their advice and suggestions. Obviously, he's well aware of the constitutional limits. But you're
But
right.
each town
Yeah, each town could.
write some strange rules.
Right.
Yeah. Darn.
Any other questions for Representative Harrison? Representative Nugent?
What's happening now when this happens? Like, how are boards dealing with it, do you know?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm sure it's different in every community. Let's start off by acknowledging that the vast majority of people are well behaved, and speak when they're supposed to and not when they don't. But many communities have individuals that take it upon themselves to speak when not spoken to, and try to dominate the conversation, sometimes in a unfortunate and threatening way. We owe a lot to our community volunteers. Select board for most communities is a volunteer position. Planning commissions are volunteer. Sure, they might get a small stipend. School boards are volunteers. And if you allow meetings to be conducted in an uncomfortable manner, you just make it that much more difficult. As I said, I have one community that's lost probably at least 3 select board members in the last couple of years. When you have a select board of 3, that's not a good outcome. So I think we need to be sensitive to that and do what we can to civil conversation done properly is what our democracy is all about.
I'm not sure my question was clear. I
Okay,
I totally
sorry.
understand that this is a problem, but I was just wondering like how boards are handling it now without this authority.
There was a situation in Montpelier, maybe last year, year before, where they utilized that section 13 VSA 10.6, and then I think it was thrown out in court, if I'm not mistaken.
Representative Snow?
I know that there are some communities that now contacting or contracting with a constable or the sheriff's department to monitor their meetings because of disruptive threats, personal threats made to the board members, or just trying to keep the civil meeting going. So putting burden on the towns to.
It is, when you're a small town with, less than 1,000 people, that's a huge.
Yeah, and it always seems to be like that one person that comes to every meeting to cause trouble.
Yeah, I think the individuals with a sort of chronic concern, I mean, it's isolated to a very, very small percentage, but they are the ones deemed to be most disruptive, it appears.
Yeah, and I would add that if they're gonna be excused for 60 days, that they can't talk for 60 days, they can zoom in and watch all you want, but you're silenced for 60 days, that's your penalty.
Yeah. That is the proposal.
Yeah.
That would be my.
Yeah, I would
mean,
defer.
That's your
Oh, I thought that
penalty.
was-
On what you can and can't.
Was it 60? Oh, I thought.
Up to.
It's 60 days, but they can still,
Yeah.
Yeah. you could zoom in, but you can't talk.
All right, anything else for Representative Harrison?
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
for
Of course.
The opportunity to be with you and see your nice new meeting room.
Take me a cup of coffee.
Thank you.
Yes, be well. Good luck down there.
Come back.
All right, yeah.
He said he can come back before 60 days.
Yeah.
He was on good behavior.
There was like one quick thing.
I need to stop putting myself in the
All right.
position.
Autumn, why don't you hit the pause button for us until we have the, oh, never mind, here we go.
Okay.
Impeccable timing, Commissioner.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Doing fine, thank you.
Your sign says busy out there, so I was just being patient waiting.
Oh, no, that is just us
Just
just
you
being
being busy?
on, like you can come
Always
in
busy.
at your convenience.
Can I introduce you to our new Director of Legislative Affairs and
Okay, baby.
Communications?
Yes, please.
You wanna come say hello to the, I don't know, like, say hi and tell you everyone who you are?
There's a second chair over there if you want to do it
Okay.
as a tandem.
record.
Yeah, we are on the record, we
We
are
are,
live,
right?
so just
Oh,
situational
sorry.
awareness, we are actively live at the moment.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Chauvin. I'm from Morrisville. Grew up in Lamoille County, went to Rice in South Burlington, spent some time in DC in Senator Leahy's office, did an MBA in France and Singapore last year, and now I'm back. Happy to be here. Great to meet you all.
Welcome to the DLL team.
Sorry to put you on the spot. Oh, good. Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you all?
Not bad, good, not bad. You know everybody, so we don't need to.
I do. Good to see you all again. You want me to talk about the sunset of the to-go cocktail bill?
Yes, let's just, it was brought to my attention that that date was coming up sooner than some of us realized, so. You wanna take a look at it?
So the department put together, the Act 67, I believe, requested the department to do a report. It's basically looking at any potential public safety impacts of the to-go alcohol option as well as the curbside pickup. As a little bit of a refresher for you all and maybe as an introduction to some of the new legislators, this was 2 years ago, we had recommended, I know the legislature was looking at making this permanent. We had 2 years of a sunset. So we went from 2021 to 2023, trying it out. We had presented a report saying that there was no public safety impact. The legislature opted to not make it permanent at that time and wanted to have another year opportunity to look at it. We have, again, no public safety impacts. The report that I had sent to the committee shows that in the work that we had done with our inspections and our compliance, I think the total number was over 7,000 of those compliance and inspections checks from July 2021 to November 2024. There were only 20 violations associated with the to-go alcohol sales. All of those were minor in nature and not impacting public safety. So they didn't have a food order, there was no label. Then there was 312 monetary fines to the licensed establishment, and only one of those involved the to-go alcohol beverage, and that was not carrying food. So it was a manufacturer with a fourth-class tasting room that didn't have food orders required. And there were no violations for curbside pickup. So based on now 4 years of reporting, we recommend, again, the department recommends, we see no reason not to make this permanent. I think it's worth pointing out that
This is really a matter of convenience for consumers. It's another option for restaurants. We really understand from the industry that not many of them are participating in this anymore. However, there's no reason to not allow it, in our view, if there's no public safety impact. Unfortunately, we don't know if and when another pandemic might come around. So having this in place gives the licensees the ability to take advantage of the to-go beverage alcohol component for the bars and restaurants, and then the curbside pickup for the retail stores.
And then the report that the commissioner was referencing is on our report page, but I had just asked Autumn to post it on today's page too, so it's accessible to today's punch list. Yeah, so this, I mean, just the backstory on this is something that was structured during COVID, shutdown, lockdowns, and then the industry felt that was a useful tool coming out. So, you know, and it was last year or 2 years ago, when we were looking at making this permanent, and the decision was made to put sunset on sunset, for lack of a better way of putting it. And so now the conversation is just, if you take a look at the language, just striking the repeal on made. So, Representative Hall.
Because I'm new and I'm not familiar with this bill, is it the sale of alcohol beverages for like a takeout order and they have to have food with it? That's why you say with food.
That's correct.
Okay. And then what about the other one, the
Curbside pickup, that allows patrons or customers to buy alcohol from a retail store, which is called a second class license. They don't have to go inside.
Okay.
Remember, this was designed during COVID, and so they could be literally curbside, and the store owner or clerk could walk the package out after they've paid.
Okay.
That-
I just want to make sure that that's how it.
Yeah,
And I think that that's become more like prevalent with people just doing like pre-orders with like, you know, whatever your standard
Grocery stores.
grocery stores in the
Right.
area, right?
Right.
And so should this no longer remain, then you could get like your full order and then still have to go in for to this helps
Yeah.
close that shopping loop. If any other questions from the committee? Yeah. I feel like we've been talking about this for
a long time. 4 years.
2021.
4 years.
I think this, yeah. Are we the only two left from the origin of this story?
We probably are, that's a little frightening.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's all we have for you right now, Commissioner. We do see that we have Amy Spear on the screen. How are you, Amy?
Doing well. How are you? Thank you
Good.
for having me today and letting me Zoom in remotely during my daughter's school vacation week. So for the record, my name is Amy Spear. I am the president of the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for the opportunity today. I am going to take a moment, just since it's my first time in this committee this year, to tell you a little bit about the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. We represent businesses of all sizes from every industry across every region of Vermont. We're the largest statewide business organization. Our core mission is to advance the Vermont economy through advocacy, community, and resources. For context of today's conversation, Vermont Independent Restaurants is a working partner of the Vermont Chamber. They have an active leadership council that helps to inform the work of the chamber. And in preparation for today, I connected with leadership team members and restaurant members to inform this testimony and get a deeper understanding of where they are with the off-premise program right now. As Commissioner Knight mentioned earlier, the Department of Liquor and Lottery has found that the off-premise program is not seen as a public safety or compliance issue. I won't go into details with the genesis of this program and the pandemic background, but looking at where we are to date with other states that have offered an off-premise program. To date, more than half of the states have made an off-premise sales program permanent There are many others that have extended the sunset. So for example, I believe it was New York State that has it until 2030. Most of them are going the route of, getting rid of that sunset. A broader national trend that we're seeing is that the programs are seen state safe across the nation, but then also an effective and essential tool for growth and resilience in the restaurant industry. So just briefly, where restaurants are today, many continue to struggle with increased costs and labor constraints. And in this context, offering off-premise alcohol sales is more than a convenience. It's an important tool that provides long-term operational stability. And as mentioned by Commissioner Knight earlier, while there are not a lot of licensees that are currently, or while the majority of licensees are not currently offering an off-premise program, there are costs with setting up a program. So we do anticipate probably a deeper participation if the sunset was eliminated with this program. So, when we look at it, while it's not the largest line of business for any licensee at this time, they are undeniably important for the overall ecosystem in the hospitality sector. So permanently establishing this measure would provide a much needed long-term stability for our restaurants that ensure that Vermont not only remains competitive and responsive to consumer demands, but it also allows businesses to diversify their revenue streams and maintain that experience that folks are looking for when they go to restaurants, since we all know that hospitality sector is built on experiences. So I will stop there and take any questions from the committee.
Anything for the chamber from the committee?
Straightforward.
Okay, like I said, this has been a very ongoing conversation. And this, was sort of where we were heading the last time this was discussed. So we do have this down or possibly low.
Tomorrow, I think.
Tomorrow, Thursday, tomorrow at
1 o'clock.
So we had discussed earlier that we were not going to do a miscellaneous alcohol bill this year due to workload. But when this popped up, we felt like this was because it is in place, and it seems to be a shared sentiment that it should remain in place, that we were going to move this as an isolated bill. So I guess it's the opportunity for folks to, in the next 15, 24 hours. If there are concerns, please address them. We can have discussion in your possible vote. Representative Nugent.
I was just curious, in the report, could you talk a little bit about the methodology and the data behind it?
Yeah, so the inspections or the compliance, so the
Public safety data.
Yep. So the Office of Compliance and Enforcement, they do routine inspections and compliance checks into the alcohol licensees. So they also do compliance checks when there's a tip. And so based on the over 7,000 compliance checks, inspections, and that's what they would go in and they would check to see if they had any, they look at their receipts to see if there's any to-go orders of food and alcohol. And so that's one of the methods they do. And they look at if there's any violations, what were the violations? And so that's where the 20 violations, they were shown to be, it wasn't labeled properly. The bill called for labeling it. The bill called for it had to be a food order, so you couldn't just place a takeout drink order from a restaurant. It would be terribly expensive if you did that, but you wouldn't do that because the requirement is to have food. It was meant as a complement. So, during COVID, during the executive order, it was designed if you wanted to give business to your local restaurant, but you couldn't dine in anymore because of COVID, you were able to purchase your meal, and your meal could include an alcohol beverage that you could go back and safely consume at the house. So, I mean, that's the work that the department does.
Was there like a geographic, like how did you decide which places to check?
So they're part of the routine compliance and inspection checks. So the department is, we have, I don't know the number now, we have 14 law enforcement investigators, there's 3 different zones, and then they, I don't know their methodology but they're just part of the routine inspections.
I just want, and
Yeah.
so all the inspections, were those places that were doing to go sales, or was it just all the inspections for the whole state?
Yeah, so we didn't know who was doing to go alcohol until we were actually going into do the compliance check. So one of the first questions they would ask is, are you offering to go food and alcohol? So if the answer was no, they would not carry on with this, compliance check. They would register at first. The first report we did kind of documented of the X number of inspections and compliance checks, like X number of licensees, 80% were doing it, or 50%. I don't remember what the first report was, but so the first question is, are you even engaging in this? So it's statewide. So I don't have the by county, but it's pretty comprehensive if you look at over 7,000.
But not all of those are like to go.
So these are a combination of the second-class licensed stores. So second-class licensed store is a retail store that you go in. It's like a package store. You go in to buy something to consume in your home. And that component was the curbside pickup. So that was looking at the requirements of the curbside pickup and how often they were doing it. We saw initially that the more of the first and the third class licensees, that's the first part of the bill, that's the curbside, that's the to-go alcohol component of it. And more of them were participating in that, right? Which is someone places an order for food and they're able to order a bottle of wine or a cocktail or a or beer.
One more. So the 20 or the violations that occurred, is there a way to know of the percentage of places that were checked, what percentage that is that have to go?
So we did 7,268 compliance checks. 20 of those had violations. So I don't have my calculator, but it's
But I mean, of the 7,000, which ones were the ones that provided the to-go option?
So you want to know, of the 7,268 compliance checks, how many, I can ask. Yeah, how many of those provided the to-go option?
Yeah, because I think that would be a better indication of the.
Well, I think the better indication is that the 20 violations are insignificant. They're not public safety related. So I think that the report overwhelmingly is saying is that there is no public safety impact. There wasn't any hold cases, for example. So the place of last drink is when we investigate if there's a DWI or a fatality, and we investigate and there's a nexus to licensed establishment. We investigate and we find if there's a link. So if there's over-serving or overselling at that licensed establishment that resulted in a DWI or fatality, then that's a POLD violation, and we enforce that. We seek the enforcement. And so in the last 4 years, they showed that there were none of the POLD cases related to a to-go cocktail beverage or curbside pickup. But I can ask the team if they have information on, of the 7,268 inspections, how many were participating in the to-go option. Yes.
Anything else for the commissioner? All right,
Thank you.
thank you so much. So that's the last piece on our agenda today. We have some time before the floor. There's no shortage of stuff for committee members to take a peek at, given the drafts that we have. So we'll utilize this for some constituent correspondence and bill prep time. Thank you all. That was a nice blend of bill introductions and parties to